So my guest today is Jason Ciment, and his company is GetVisible.com. And Jason, do you want to tell me a little bit about what you do and how you do it, and then we'll explore from there.
Sure. So Get Visible started around 2006 or so as a digital agency just doing search engine optimization. And then every couple of years, we added another service to the matrix, started hiring more people. It started originally with my partner, Michael, who used to be an employee of mine 20 years ago in my first business. And so we started with SEO. Then we hired a designer. We started building WordPress websites. Then we started doing Google AdWords management and Yahoo before it was Bing. And then we did social media, starting with posting on people's updates on Facebook. And then we added more channels. And then the last thing is doing pay-per-click advertising on social channels. So we'll do boosted posts, we'll do remarketing, we'll do Instagram and Facebook type ads and Pinterest and Twitter and LinkedIn and YouTube, just the basic 6 channels of social media. And the last thing that we've done in the last couple of years is LinkedIn marketing, which is different than the other ones because you're doing one-to-one outreach to people based on job profiles. And the other thing is reputation management, that if you have a client that gets in trouble with the law or with a partner or a former spouse, and they have bad news on Google, we clean that up. So that's called reputation management. So we're basically a one-stop shop.
And the one thing you mentioned just now is people getting in trouble with the law. I think that's an area that people would be interested in learning about, is the ADA, the new ADA lawsuits. So have you seen a lot of these new ADA lawsuits?
Yes, and there's actually, I just read an article last night, there's 10 law firms in the country that account for, I think, 85% of all the American Disabilities Act lawsuits. And just for a brief moment, the ADA trouble is not what I meant, but it's still worth talking about. It's a question of if you actually get sued by somebody because your website's not compliant, that's going to show up because it's a lawsuit. And then you're going to come to me and you're going to say 2 things. One, can you clean my website to make sure that it's compliant? And the second thing is get rid of all the bad news about us not being in compliance. So if people type in my brand, the first page of Google is clean. In regards to compliance, the lawsuits last year were like 1 every hour. Now it's probably more like 1 every minute. And what's happening is you have certain law firms that are hiring blind people to be their shill, and they go to a website. If they can't access it, if there's no plugin for disabilities, right then and there they can file a lawsuit, and it's statutory. And if they don't settle, they could technically get $4,000 in penalties for each incident, plus lawyer fees. And the lawsuits just keep piling up. But California, I think, passed a law that limits the number of lawsuits any one individual can file, which means they have to find more blind people.
And when did you start seeing these lawsuits pop up?
Well, I didn't notice it until about a year ago, just because it wasn't a big discussion point, but they've been going for a couple of years already. And what we did is we built a website for people that's an informational site called Website Compliance with ADA.com, and it covers 61 different things you need to look for in a website to make sure that it's compliant. I'm not saying you have to do everything. There's kind of like 2 layers of compliance. Number one is we all agree that if someone is disabled, they should have access to your website, no different than having a ramp going into a restaurant or a hotel. So that's like, it's not fair that if someone is blind, they can't access the content. Yes, they can't see your images, nothing you can do about that, but they should at least know if you put up an image, what is the image trying to say? So if you're showing a product image, then at least say this is an image of our product, because it would be unfair for them to just not have that experience. Same thing if you're having a restaurant menu and you're showing pictures of the food, tell them what the picture is, what the food is you're describing. So that's something called an alt tag, which is a way of applying a description to an image. And that is kind of the baseline. The second thing for someone that is using a blind reading device is you give them access to a screen manager that enables them to manipulate how the screen is displayed. So for example, if let's say they're not blind, but they just have problems seeing contrast of colors, the screen manipulator enables them to change the contrast or to change the colors on the screen to monochrome black and white. And so one of the programs that we use is called userway.org. It's a free plugin. It takes a couple of hours to configure. And once that's done, it doesn't make you compliant, but it gets you to the point where if someone is disabled, they can access a lot more of the content on your website. Then you have to do manually a lot of cleanup, which takes many hours, depending, again, on the degree of compliance you want to give.
Is there a way to know how compliant you are, or do you just have to go through a checklist and really know the law?
Great question. So there's 3 different tools that you can use. So far, they're all free. One of them is called the Wave tool, which has a plugin for Chrome and for Firefox. That's the most basic test. And it can't test for certain things like a blind device, but it gives you a kind of an opening gambit to say, all right, if you have errors that show up there, you definitely have other errors. So that's the first baseline. The second thing is Google has a tool called LIGHTHOUSE. So if you download their tool for Chrome only and you run it, it will show you other exposure points on your coding. The last tool, which is the most comprehensive, and right now it's free to see it on screen, but you have to upgrade if you want to download a report. It's a company called DEQUE. I think it's DEQUE. And they have a program called Axe, like an axe. And if you run that, basically you just go to your web page, you have the plugin installed, you go to the web developer toolkit inside Chrome, you invoke the Axe tool, you run a report, and it shows you all the things that they're considered violations, warnings, errors. They give you different degrees. It's very, very aggressive in getting to the details of getting into compliance. Let me just clarify one thing. It's very important. To get to full compliance, it's thousands of dollars, because if you do it right, you're hiring a blind person to test your website. But a lesser degree of compliance is putting the plugin on, getting your alt tags in order, fixing other tags like all your contact forms, especially when you have error messaging. There's something called area labeling. Another thing is if you have header tags, they should be all structured properly. It's called nesting. They should be nested properly. If you do all of those very obvious things and you have the plugin working, it would be very hard for a disabled person, and what I mean really the lawyer who's representing the disabled person, to argue that you deserve a full penalty for not being in compliance because you did substantial performance. And it's the lawsuits that I'm seeing are not against people that are doing substantial compliance. They're against people that are abusive and not doing anything, or they're just putting up a plugin, but they're not correcting the content on their websites. And I'll say one last thing is you can find some websites that offer a technology, their own plugin. They say, if you put this in, you're going to be in compliance. It's just not true. And there are lawsuits already being filed against companies that are just putting in a plugin and not doing anything else. So it's very important.
And so you get people coming to you who have already gotten sued or gotten a demand letter. And
no, I have not. The people are coming to me because I'm reaching out to people in advance, helping them to get protected before they get that letter. But I have partnerships with a couple of people in the industry, and I made friends with them. They're telling me about the lawsuits that they are seeing. Plus, I'm also monitoring the news to see lawsuits that are getting filed, just to get a sense of what degree of compliance I need to deliver for the budget that we're getting.
Do you know if there are specific industries that are targeted more, or is it just every website that's out there?
So there's certain industries that have been targeted. Law firms are being targeted because they're easy. I mean, they're lawyers. They should know the law. So if they're not compliant, you can kind of say shame on them. And again, it's not clear who has to be in compliance. The American Disabilities Act has something called the public accommodation with 15 descriptions for what a public accommodation is. And under the Disabilities Act, the law basically says you have to provide equal access if you're qualified as a public accommodation, which is why you see a ramp at a restaurant as the easiest example. It's not clear when a website is a public accommodation, but one of the tests is if you have a career tab on your website or some area of the website for people to apply for a job, then you're clearly under the ADA regulations, because everybody should have equal access to apply for a job. So that's one example. And hotels, I mean, certainly people with big pockets are the ones being sued. Some companies are getting sued over and over because, again, until you fix it, you can just be sued by different firms and different blind people. But there are, I wouldn't say that there's any industry dominance. Anybody who fits within the guidelines of having a careers page or access that should be a public accommodation, they need to fix their website.
Now let's talk about more of the traditional marketing work that you do. So you said you do LinkedIn advertising, you do the top 6, you Google, Yahoo, Bing. What sort of results could someone expect if they want to go marketing? Like a lot of people, you know, I'm a lawyer, so a lot of lawyers say, well, I'm all referral, I do business litigation, real estate, I don't do personal injury or plaintiff side employment, which is where you traditionally think of people spending big money on advertising. So would it work for business litigators, let's say, who charge hourly? Maybe they're not taking contingency fees, so they're not looking for a huge number of clients. They're just looking for a few big clients.
Correct. So I would say to a business litigator that there's 2 things that you could do. We'll use as the example. Number one is, it's 3 things. Number one is you should have a very powerful website. And when I say powerful, I mean it should just look like, if your billing rate is $500 an hour, make the website look like you can afford, that you're making $500 an hour, that you're not posing, if you will. And it's sort of like 30 years ago when I was growing up, if you were in the real estate business, you drove a Mercedes. And then maybe you got a Lexus when Lexus became something you could buy. You had to show you were making money. So a website should show that you're successful from a visual perspective. And then from a content perspective, the things that you can do is publish thought pieces on your website in a blog or just as pages on the website that establish your credibility as an authority in certain areas of the law, or just in your ability to try cases, depending on how you carve out your expertise and your authority. Publishing good content about that is always a benefit to you. So that's number one. The second thing that you can do is, because many of your cases will likely come from other attorneys, is you can build your network of relationships of attorneys. And for that, LinkedIn is the best place to go. That's why we developed this one-to-one outbound marketing on LinkedIn. So for example, we have a lawyer who gets all of his business from personal injury lawyers that don't handle certain types of cases that he does. So they're happy. I mean, we set a record with him. Within an hour and a half of launching the outreach, he had already gotten a lead, because that was exactly the market he needed. In your case, it's a little bit more open-ended, because technically any lawyer who's on the contractual side but not doing litigation could be a source of business for you. So it's hard to know what type of lawyer is going to be the best referral for a general business litigator, if that helps. But growing your network and then publishing content into your network with status updates that are good thought pieces, those are the ways to use online to enhance to extend your reputation, if you will.
And how much content do you think someone should publish? If it's a blog post, what should they do? Try to do a post a week, a post a month?
Okay, so here's the question. This is an ongoing issue. You could post weekly a 500-word blog post and spend, let's say, 2 hours writing each post, which is very expensive, especially as a lawyer. That's 2 hours at a $500 an hour billing rate. That's technically $1,000 of your time. I'm not sure it's worth it to spend $4,000 of time publishing 400 or 500 word blog posts that are only going to touch on a subject, as opposed to a 2,000 word post that may take you 4 or 5 hours instead of 8 hours because it's only on one topic and you can go deeper. You could then spend a little bit of money to make the page look really nice, getting some custom graphics, and post one of those every month. We call them internally power pages. If you're putting up a page like that, and you're then, I should have mentioned before, you have your personal network, not just your LinkedIn friends, but your own email list. You should be always adding people that you meet at events to your email list. I mean, I have 3,600 people on my email list, and I get 10 to 20%, sometimes even higher, when I send out an announcement to my emails. People are opening that and I get feedback. So if you're putting out a 2,000 word piece, you're sending it to your email list, and you're only doing it once a month, and you can even record a video of you talking about the piece that you've just published, because video gets seen 7 times as much as text or clicked on. You could actually create a little bit of buzz once a month around things that you're doing. And you can also try to integrate an article around a case that you're working on to the extent that you can publicize it. So that's what I think you can also, of course, hire somebody to write the 2,000 word article and just put your name on it after editing it. So that's what most of the attorneys that we know do, is they hire someone to write on a topic who's probably a retired attorney, and then they edit it and they put their own personal flavor into it, and then they put it out as if it's their own piece. And there's nothing wrong with that.
And so it's more than just putting out an article every month. There's the article, there's a LinkedIn strategy, there's a whole big, broad marketing strategy for any business to do, and not just one piece if they want to really delve into digital marketing.
Correct. And the one piece that we didn't talk about, but you started to ask, was search engine rankings. Now, in your line of business, search engine rankings are probably not going to be useful if someone's looking for a litigator. But let's say you wrote one of these 2,000 word pieces and you put it in your website, and you had optimized your website, and you said, you know what, I just want to make sure that the coding of my website is appropriate. I get a couple of websites linking to my website to give it authority. If you're writing about a particular topic and you have keywords in that article that are relevant to that topic, it's quite possible that someone who's going to Google looking for an authority in the topic could stumble upon your article, which is how many attorneys I know who don't invest heavily in SEO but do invest in content are getting hired because they've put out a position paper on some very finite area of law or some circumstance, and because no one else is writing on it, they're getting picked up.
And what about the paid advertising, like Google AdWords? How does that fit into
okay, so the way that would work in using this example, because again, we're not going to buy ads for business litigators. So if you wanted to have an advertising campaign, you would do keyword research using Google's Planner, or you hire somebody like me to come up with keyword phrases that are relevant to those articles that you're putting out there, so that if someone's typing in, let's say, lawyer and what do you call it, suing a zoo, you know, mauled by an animal at a zoo, something really peculiar as opposed to just getting a dog bite, then it's such a rare circumstance, but the point is you would own that space, and that's the idea. So for example, we have a lawyer who specializes in a certain type of appellate law. So if you go to Google and you just type in certain phrases related to his appellate practice, he owns it. Or we have another attorney who's an ERISA attorney. Almost any phrase that you can think of that's relevant to ERISA law, he's already ranking for it, because he's got so much content, dozens and dozens of articles, that he ranks for it, on top of the fact that we're doing the natural organic things that we have to do. But because he has so much content out there on all these arcane areas of law, he tends to rank higher than others.
So for people out there who really want to boost their business and boost their digital marketing, it sounds like there's some stuff they could start at for free. They start putting out content, putting out articles, that sounds like the very first step is for them to just start writing articles. And
Correct.
then, and that they can do. And then maybe put together some sort of newsletter that they can send to their contact list. And maybe that's still free. And then at some stage, they have to come to an expert like you to make sure that their website looks professional if they don't already have one that matches what, you know, the level of service they provide, to make sure that they're ADA compliant. And would that be the next stage after they're already putting out content?
Yes.
Is that when they're ready to come to you?
Yes, it makes sense. And the one other thing that they would do is have us look at the technical nature of the website to make sure, not just the ADA stuff, but make sure that the search engine optimization features are embedded into the coding of the website. Even if they're not investing heavily into SEO, it pays to have a baseline done on your website if you're investing in content, because then there's a chance that your pieces could get picked up. And by the way, you also have the opportunity when you post an article that people will share it. So there's a whole, it's what do you call it? The butterfly effect. Once you write that first piece, there's different ways to utilize that content across different channels that have like a reoccurring effect, if you will.
Yeah, so it starts to ripple out.
Yes, that's a better word.
And magnify. And what's the baseline budget that they should set aside for you? Is it a check-in once a quarter, or is it a monthly fee that they really need to set aside as a marketing budget so that you could plan and implement a real marketing plan instead of just a consultation once a year, if that's even effective?
Right. No, we don't do anything like that. It's monthly. We have, let's say right now, 40 monthly clients. And the idea is that depending on the nature of their business, we could be meeting weekly, bi-weekly, once a month. Just depends on how much time they want to allocate, how much time they really need to be on the phone with us. Otherwise, they can just look at reports via email if they're satisfied with that. But most clients range starting around $2,000 a month, and it can go as high as $10,000 a month, at least for us. There are agencies that charge more. We're not usually higher than that. And it depends, even when we're working with $1 billion corporation, which we have one client like that, still our fee is not over 10 grand a month, because the division of the business that we're in doesn't require us to spend more money, them to spend more than what they're paying for. So one side of the equation is how much business are we responsible for? And the other side of the equation is how much work are we doing? So a business that's doing $1 million a year may be spending the same money as a business doing 10 million a year, just depending on how many keywords are being covered if we're doing search engine optimization, how much business they're getting from pay-per-click advertising, how many times a week are we posting on social media pages. So the range of cost depends on how much we're doing and also how competitive it is, which kind of leads to how much we have to do. If you came to me and said, I want to get ranked for mortgage interest, mortgage rates, that's as competitive as you're going to get. Or trucking accidents cost $200 a click on Google. So the amount of work we have to do to get ranked for a trucking accident lawyer is far different than an ERISA lawyer. So the price tags would be different. But 2,000 is kind of a baseline for us, because if you want to get my time or my partner's time and some higher level people in our organization and not get an hour a month, you're going to have to imagine that you're spending in the same way you hire your attorney for $400 or $500 an hour. Not that we're charging those kind of rates, but you're going to want to have at least 5 to 10 hours of our time and our team if you want to see results emanating from the work that we're doing for you and the work that you're doing on your own.